Do you get bored doing the same endlessly repetitive tasks over and over again as a Java developer? Well, in this episode, we'll show you how to take the boredom out of the mundane stuff while projecting your path to super productivity in your developer role. Coming up.
Java Easy. News, tutorials, tips. Everything you need to know as a beginner Java developer.
Hi and welcome to this week's podcast. Now, first of all, before we start, if you're new to Java and need a helping hand, you can go grab our Java Starter Kit. It's available over at our website, javaeasily.com, and you'll be able to go grab it over there. It's a really helpful guide, really useful. It'll get you up and running with Java in no time at all. But anyway, let's get into this week's content now. So in this week's episode, we're talking about how to script or customize your developer environment. Okay? I don't know about you, but I'm tired of always typing the same commands. And if you always find yourself typing the same commands over and over again, you don't have to, is the message of this episode. You really don't have to, because what you can do is you can create your own customized developer environment. And what we mean by this is it's an environment. When we say environment, right, yeah, it feels so abstract. What's an environment? This is an environment now, this kind of studio that I'm in, or whatever, this office that I'm in, this is an environment, yeah? When we say environment in terms of a developer environment, what we're really meaning is the tools that you have accessible to you, the commands that you have accessible to you, that are available to you, which comprise the environment variables, the aliases, the functions. We'll go into these in a second. That's what we mean by your developer environment, okay? So if you're tired of always typing the same stuff, for example, you could come up with a function, right, which would basically, or an alias, which would basically do the same thing. So instead of you having to type out the 3 commands each time, right, you could basically compress those 3 commands into a single command. And a single command then is available to you as its own command line command that you type in your environment. And how we do that is in Bash, for example, which is what I use, which is the shell that backs the terminal session on Mac. So when I launch a terminal on Mac, actually I use iTerm these days, but I used to use terminal. But when you open up a terminal on Mac, or iTerm on Mac, the so-called shell interpreter, or the interpreter for that is Bash. At least I configure mine to be Bash, which is a specific type of shell. And that enables me to customize or to create a developer environment for myself by having a file called a .bashrc file, a bash resource file, or sometimes it can be a .bash_profile file, which is inside my home directory, right? And inside there, I can create environment variables, right, that I want to use. So for example, my Java_home, that's going to be one, M2_home, which points to the Maven installation, things like that, right? So I have my environment variables defined in there. I also have any aliases in there. Aliases are a sequence of commands that I'm going to use, which I bind that sequence of commands to just a single command or a name, which I can just type in, and then it runs that alias for me as if it's a command in its own right. And what it does is it's literally an alias for those commands that I've put against that alias. Or I can write my own functions as well. And that's when you have to get a bit more fine-grained about the level of control that you have. Now, where this is useful, or where I use this, for example, is in a project, right? So in a project, I might have at any one time, say, 5 feature branches. Now, I know when you're using Git or a version control system like Git, you can switch the branch that you're working on. This might be advanced for some people. If it is, you can just tune out for this bit if you like, or try and follow along and maybe look it up on Google or whatever. That's probably a better approach. But in general, if you're in a particular directory, you can check out a specific branch, right? So you can be working on a specific branch, and then you have somebody else comes along and says, "Oh, can you just fix this on a different branch?" So yeah, you can inside the same folder check out to a different branch in Git. You can do that, right? But I don't do that because that's too clunky as a workflow, in my opinion. So what I do is I have 5 different feature branches for back-end work and 5 different feature branches for the front-end work or the UI work. And so the reason I'm saying this is because one of my aliases, for example, is CD F3BE, for example, right? And what that will do is that will CD into the 3rd feature branch, CD F3, of the backend project, BE. So CD F3BE. And I know now I'm in, the feature 3 branch of that particular backend project. Okay? That's one thing I might do. I can also do back F3BE, for example, BAK F3BE. And what that'll do is I've created a little function which will take whatever's in feature 3 of that backend project, and it will make a copy of that. So it'll CP-R, make a full copy of that directory in the folder above, but appending the timestamp. So the date, So YYYY underscore and then HMM, SS or whatever. And that's useful, for example, before I do any like advanced Git operation like rebasing, just in case, to be honest. Sometimes things screw up, just in case it screws things up. So it's nice to have a backup, right? That's another example of an alias, right? Speaking of which, sometimes with all these branches around, I might not know which particular branch is in my feature 3 folder, in which case I've got a function that I've written called show feature branches, and when I type show feature branches, it goes through and it shows me all of the feature folders for the backend work, so feature 2, feature 3, feature 4, feature 5 in the backend folder, and the same for the UI or the front end work, so feature 2, feature 3, feature 4, feature 5, etc. of the UI stuff, and it'll basically just show me what branch is there by executing the git branch command inside that folder, and then my function just basically prints out each folder and then prints out whatever the result of the git branch command is, and I can see at a glance, okay, in feature 3, I've got this piece of work, in feature 4, I've got this piece of work, feature 5, I've got this piece of work, or whatever it would be. Doesn't matter, what you use it for, and it doesn't matter how advanced you get, you can still always make use of these aliases and these functions. A simple example, right, when you're just starting out, a crazy simple example, Maven clean install. When you do mvn space clean install, that's a common command to do when you're using Maven, right? To just like run through all the, compile everything, test everything, spit out a jar file or whatever the end deployable artifact is, right? So we do Maven clean install all the time. But again, you're having to type out 3 words, Maven clean install, mvn clean install. It's kind of a pain in the neck, right? So instead you can create an alias. So you can do alias MCI. We call the alias MCI. That's the command we're going to type now. Instead of typing Maven clean install, we'll just type MCI, right? And we'll just do alias MCI equals, and then in quotes, mvn space clean space install, right? This is inside your .bashrc file, we said. And that means that then when we go into the shell again, you have to refresh the shell, by the way. This will catch you out if you haven't done this before, but you have to exec bash, as a command, which replaces the current bash shell with the latest version, right? To be able to reread that bashrc file, or you can just basically kill the terminal or iterminal and go back into it or whatever. It's entirely up to you. But then when you do that, and now you have this new command available to you, MCI. So instead of having to constantly type maven clean install, we just type MCI, enter, and it's done. And it expands that MCI out to whatever was in the double quotes, to maven clean install or mvn clean install. So that can be useful as well. So this is what you want to be doing, really, is you want to create your own bash environment or create your own developer environment to be able to customize your developer workflow and give you the commands that you actually want. This is really what you're doing. If there's not a command, if there's something that's missing for me, when I'm like, I really like to be able to just type this and it just does whatever I want it to do. Like it queries a particular JSON file and pulls out these particular things or whatever it might be, or it does a curl request, or it gets a, OAuth token, well, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. I find something that's missing for me personally, and I just bring it into being by like writing that alias or writing that function or whatever it might be. And that's the nice thing about programming and coding, right? It's the fact that we can always, be full masters of like creating our own kind of like mini universe of stuff, from like nothing being there to like a full working complete program deployed in the cloud or whatever, That's a great thing about IT and a great thing about coding, and the thing that keeps me coming back as a software engineer, that being able to produce something out of nothing, it's amazing, right? But we don't just have to, use our skills just for that thing. We can also use our developer skills to make our working lives easier and become super productive by creating these customized developer environments. So yeah, look to do that. Create your own bash environment, create aliases for common commands you have, functions when it's a bit more complex. You can store environment variables in there as well. You can also get a bit meta with it too, right? So I actually have, it's a bit more complex, but I actually have a habit of like version controlling the code notes that I have, and markdown files of code notes and project notes and everything. I actually version control those. And I have aliases to control the bashrc. So I'm version controlling the customizations that I do in my environment as well. That's something you can do, but that's going a bit too far for most people. But it's nice then because you'll never lose any of the work that you do, which can be useful. But it's nice for me because it means whenever I make a code change, whenever I make a change to these vital assets that I'm using, I can just check them in at the end of the day, or whenever I remember. Sometimes I forget to do things, which is why you should always remember to do things, or set a reminder to do things, to keep things in your head. But it's nice because I can always version control my own environment, which I like to be able to do. So whenever you find yourself repeating stuff, script it if you can. That's the moral of the story. And you can also go the extra mile as well, by the way, and actually not just script it for you, but once you've got a set of scripts or whatever which are working nicely for you. So you've got aliases, you've got functions, and then if you have to have something much more complex, you can push it into its own script. That's where I'm referring to scripts now. But But yeah, once you have something that works well for you, it might work well for other team members as well. And if you're in a nice, friendly team, it can be really nice to say, do you know what? I've created this tool. It's really cool. It saves me, several hours per week or whatever. Yeah, you can use this and you give it to the team. And that's very nice as well, because you get a lot of goodwill back from that. You're seen as kind of like, oh, he's the man or whatever. Kind of thing for, giving out something as useful as that, which a lot of people don't do these days, but it's nice to be able to give things to people and to make other people's working lives better and more efficient. And also project managers will see that, your boss will see that and that kind of thing, which is also useful. It consolidates your position as a professional, and as a good team player and all that kind of good stuff. Only do that, by the way, if you happen to be in a nice, friendly team. If you're not in a friendly team, and sometimes this happens when you can be in a toxic team, then, if you try and push out some kind of tool to, a team which you work in where they're kind of like toxic, a lot of the times it's not received in the spirit with which it's given. It's not like people gratefully receiving something and saying, oh, thanks, Matt, I appreciate you gave that to me or whatever. It's saving me tons of time. Instead, it'll be very critical, kind of like, well, why have you done it this way? Or, well, I can just do this instead or whatever. It's just like, save yourself the bother, of just basically, trying to gift something to somebody who doesn't have the humility to accept it in a nice way. A bit of a side tangent, but sometimes we work with toxic team members, so that's just something to bear in mind. But if you work in a good team and you have good teammates and everything, it can be nice to share the love, as it were. So really, it's about regularly assessing where and how you can become more efficient, and you learn more things the more you go on, and the quicker you become, the more slack time you can have to then improve yourself even more, or you make more productivity tools and everything. So it's a win-win situation on all levels, which is fantastic. Anyway, I hope that was useful to you. Until next time, maybe have a play around, read about bash scripting and that kind of stuff, try and customize your own developer environment. And by the way, it's on Windows too as well. You can still do this kind of stuff on Windows with Git Bash, for example, which you might want to take a look at, or you can even do your own DOS commands as well. It's also possible. Anyway, hope that's good. Hope that's useful. Until next time, keep coding, stay happy as a developer, and speak soon. Bye.